Don't be selfish, think about the child, my brother said as he took over my apartment. You have money, you can rent something else, his wife said as she threw my things around. I didn't argue, I just smiled and left. 48 hours later, their faces when I changed the locks were unforgettable. My grandmother used to tell me that family promises were sacred, that blood was always above all else. But when I returned to Madrid after a work trip and found my brother living in my apartment, I knew that was a big lie. Oh, look who's here, said Ignacio, my older brother, with a smile too relaxed for the situation. He was in my living room with his feet on my coffee table, the same dark wood table that my grandmother had bought at a flea market in Seville, and that I had restored with my own hands. Now it was covered with sticky glass marks and crumbs. Next to him, Claudia, his wife, was looking at her phone without even feigning discomfort while their son played on the floor with a toy car. But not just any car, with my toy car, that little collectible Seat 600 that my grandfather had given me when I was a girl. The knot in my stomach tightened. I left my suitcase at the door, my eyes scanning the mess. The rug I brought from Morocco was wrinkled and stained with juice. A painting I had hung so carefully on the wall was now crooked. And the worst, my photos were gone. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice more controlled than I felt. Claudia let out a fake giggle. Well, Ignacio thought that since you were away, we could settle in with the child. It's hard to find something decent, and since this was Grandma's house, that's what they called it, as if the will didn't exist, as if my name wasn't on the papers. Settle in. I repeated incredulously. Auntie, don't get like that, Ignacio said, standing up with an annoyed expression. Grandma always wanted this house to be for the family, and you're alone while we have a child. You really need that much space. Rage rose through me like fire. Grandma left me this apartment in her will, I said through gritted teeth. It's not the family's, it's mine. Ignacio sighed dramatically and shook his head. Don't be selfish, Lucia. Think about the child. It couldn't be. Not only were they stealing my house, but they were also trying to make me feel guilty. How did you have the nerve to move in without telling me? I asked, feeling the heat rise to my face. Don't exaggerate, he replied, looking at me condescendingly. We're just here until we find something better. I looked around, feeling a mix of disgust and despair. They hadn't just moved in, they had changed things, as if trying to erase my existence. The ivy plant I had in the kitchen was gone, replaced by a can of baby formula. The blanket my grandmother knitted for me, the one with beige and blue tones, was no longer on the sofa. In its place was a horrendous synthetic blanket covered in teddy bears. They were replacing me in my own home. Claudia stood up, crossing her arms in annoyance. If you were a generous person, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I let out a humorless laugh. If you were decent people, neither would we. My heart pounded as I watched them. They thought they could walk all over me. They thought I would say yes. I didn't have a plan yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. The elevator smelled of dampness and cheap perfume, that unmistakable scent of cleaning mornings in old Madrid buildings. But when I reached the door of my apartment, all I smelled was invasion. The door was ajar, the latch lock gone. Ignacio and Claudia hadn't just broken into my house, they had taken full possession. I pushed the door open hard and entered without asking permission. The mess was still there, but now I saw it with different eyes, like a declaration of war. My grandmother's old armchair, the one that always smelled of her violet perfume, was now covered with a cheap gray blanket. The hand-embroidered cushions that she sewed herself were gone. They must have thrown them away. My desk, where I used to write at night with a glass of wine, was piled high with poorly folded baby clothes. But the worst was seeing my things piled up in boxes in the hallway. What the hell is this? My voice was sharp, icy. Ignacio came out of the kitchen with a cup of coffee in hand, as if he were in his own house. Oh, Lucia, you're back early. Don't answer with nonsense, Ignacio. Why are my things in boxes? Ignacio shrugged and set the cup down on the counter with a thud. Claudia thought it would be better to reorganize the space a bit. You know, so the baby has his own room. His own room. I repeated, incredulous. Lucia, it's just a house. I let out a bitter laugh. No, Ignacio, it's my house. That's when Claudia appeared in the hallway with an annoyed expression and a bowl of cereal in hand. Look, Lucia, do you really need this much drama? She said, shoving a spoonful into her mouth. You have money. I'm sure you can rent another place. I looked at her in disbelief. Excuse me, dear. Ignacio intervened with his most conciliatory tone, the same one he used when he tried to convince Mom that he hadn't stolen money from her wallet. We're just saying to share it. It would be good for us. Share it. I laughed, although there wasn't a shred of humor in my voice. How do you share your house with me? Oh wait, you don't. Claudia sighed and put her cereal bowl on the table. You're selfish, Lucia. And you're opportunistic, I retorted. No need to get like this. Oh no. I took a step forward, noticing how Claudia moved slightly behind him. You know what's needed? That you get out of here. Lucia. Ignacio used his big brother tone, the one that had always worked on me when we were little. Mom and Dad also think it would be best if we used the apartment. There it was, what they were really saying. It wasn't just Ignacio and Claudia, Mom and Dad were behind this. Rage burned inside me. Mom, with her insistent family, should always help each other. Dad, with his complicit silence. 4 years they had seen me as the strong one, the one who could manage alone, the one who always had to give in. Well, no, not this time. I crossed my arms and looked at them with a cold smile. Interesting. I'd like to see what a judge thinks. Claudia blinked, confused. Ignacio paled. What? I pulled out my phone and held it up to them. I have the inheritance papers. I have photos of my things in boxes, proof that you've changed the locks and moved in without my permission. Do you want to keep playing and see what happens? Ignacio clenched his jaw. You're not going to report us. I'm not so sure, I said, sliding my finger across the screen as if I were already looking for a lawyer. Claudia quickly approached Ignacio and whispered something in his ear. He looked at her with annoyance but said nothing. I stood there waiting. For the first time I saw the controls slip from their hands. They didn't know what to do because for the first time I wasn't playing the understanding sister. I didn't have a perfect plan yet, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to end like this. Ignacio ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. His gaze went from Claudia to me, as if waiting for someone to give him an easy way out. Claudia, on the other hand, had no problem continuing her victim act. Lucia, you don't have to be like this. We're organizing ourselves as a family. I laughed in her face. Organizing? No, honey, organizing is asking before moving into someone else's house. What you're doing is stealing. Claudia made a noise of annoyance and crossed her arms. God, what drama. We're just trying to live better at your expense. She shrugged as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Ignacio, who had until now tried to maintain his conciliatory tone, changed his strategy. You know what? Mom and Dad are right about you. You think you're better than us, just because you have money and can afford to live alone. There was the low blow. I felt the rage bubbling inside me, but I controlled it. I think I'm better? I let out a dry laugh. I don't need to think it, Ignacio. I am. I saw his jaw tense and knew I had touched a nerve. Since we were little, Ignacio had been the favorite, the male, the older one, the one who was never to blame for anything. I was always the one who had to share, the one who had to help, the one who had to give in. But now I had something he didn't, independence, success. And he hated it. Look, Lucia, he began to say with forced patience, but I cut him off immediately. No, now you're going to listen to me. I took out my phone again and opened my contact list. I'm going to call the police. Ignacio's eyes went wide. Claudia let out an incredulous giggle. You wouldn't dare. I put the phone on speaker and dialed. 12. Wait. Ignacio shouted, approaching quickly to grab my arm. I looked at him with an icy smile. Yes. Lucia, please, there's no need to make this bigger than it is. I raised an eyebrow. Oh no? What do you call breaking into someone's house, changing the locks, and kicking out the rightful owner? Ignacio swallowed. He knew the answer. Look, just give me a couple of days. Claudia looked at him furiously. What do you mean, a couple of days? Ignacio ignored her and looked at me pleadingly. We'll fix it. We'll leave. I hung up before the call connected and looked at him with a victorious smile. You have 48 hours. Not a minute more. I turned without another word, grabbed one of the boxes with my things, and walked towards the door. Just before leaving, I stopped and looked over my shoulder. Oh, and by the way, if a single one of my things disappears, I'll report you anyway. I left without giving them a chance to respond. I went down the stairs, feeling the adrenaline in my blood. Ignacio was cornered and he knew it. But I wasn't stupid. I knew my brother wasn't going to give up so easily. So I did 3 things as soon as I left my own building. I called a locksmith. I wasn't going to let them get away with it again. If Ignacio didn't leave in 48 hours, I would be the one changing the locks. I called my lawyer. Yes, I had a lawyer because unlike my family, I planned ahead. I called Mom. When she picked up, her tone of false concern was already waiting for me. Lucia, honey, why all the fuss? Ignacio told me you got hysterical. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Tell me the truth, Mom. Since when did you know they had moved into my apartment? There was a pause, long enough to confirm my suspicions. Don't see it that way. They have a child, Lucia. I smiled without joy. Aha, so you knew. Don't exaggerate. And if they had occupied someone else's house, would you justify it too? But it's not someone else, Lucia. It's your brother. Family helps family. The same old phrase. No, Mom, family doesn't steal from family, Lucia. I hung up. I knew Ignacio was going to try something. Maybe Mom would call him to try to manipulate me, maybe Claudia would put on some kind of victim act. I didn't care. I was going to make sure that this time when they left it was for good. The next 2 days were a hell of messages and calls. Mom, Dad, Ignacio, Claudia, all trying to make me change my mind. Lucia, do you really want your nephew to be homeless? Mom's voice sounded hurt, as if I were a heartless monster. Honey, just think about it. Dad is always trying to be the useless peacemaker. Lucia, this is ridiculous, you're acting like a child. Ignacio, on the verge of desperation. Auntie, how can you be so cold? We just wanted stability for our son. Claudia, the queen of emotional manipulation. I didn't answer any of them. While they tried to convince me with their blackmail, I executed my plan. Update. Lock change at 7 a.m. on the second day. The locksmith was already at my door. So they changed the locks without your permission? The man murmured as he examined the door. Yes, I replied, crossing my arms. And now I want it back. In less than half an hour, Ignacio and Claudia no longer had access to my apartment. No more invasion, no more excuses. Ignacio tried to call me at noon. I ignored him. At 5 p.m. he showed up at the building banging on the door like crazy. Lucia, open the door. I sat calmly on the sofa, enjoying a coffee while he continued yelling in the hallway. After 10 minutes he gave up. The message was clear. The next day Mom decided to take matters into her own hands. Honey, we need to talk. We met at a coffee shop near her house. Mom arrived with her martyr face, the one she used when she wanted me to feel guilty. This has gone too far, she said, putting her teacup on the table. Ignacio is devastated. I rolled my eyes. He's devastated because he can no longer live for free in my house. Poor thing. Mom sighed as if she had to deal with an impossible daughter. Look, Lucia, he's your brother. Not my problem. Of course it is, she said, frowning. Family should always help each other. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Tell me something, Mom. If I had entered Ignacio's house without permission, changed the locks and kicked him out, would you defend me too? Mom opened her mouth but didn't say anything. That's what I thought. Lucia, her voice sounded more tired this time. Why are you doing this? I smiled slowly. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not going to let them walk all over me. Mom remained silent. She knew she wasn't going to win this battle. She stood up, took her coat, and looked at me sadly. I hope someday you'll understand what it means to be family. I shrugged. I hope someday you'll understand what it means to respect your daughter. She left without looking back. That night, when I returned to my apartment, I found an envelope on the floor. From Ignacio. Inside was a note written in his messy handwriting. Congratulations, you won. But don't be surprised when one day you need something and no one's there for you. I let out a laugh and tore the paper in two. Ignacio was gone, he had lost. I closed the door and dropped onto the sofa with a smile. This time I was the one who set the rules. The silence in my apartment was different. It was no longer the emptiness of invasion but the calm of victory. Ignacio and Claudia were gone. Their last threatening note was in the bin. But I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't completely over. And I was right. On Sunday morning my phone rang. Mom. I didn't answer. 2 minutes later another attempt. Dad. I sighed and ignored it. The third attempt was from an unknown number. Who is it? I asked when I answered. Lucia, it's Dad. I rolled my eyes. Of course, now they were calling from another number because they knew I wasn't going to answer them. What's up? Look, his voice sounded tired. Your mother and I have been talking. Can we meet? No. An uncomfortable silence. Lucia, we can't go on like this. Oh, really? I said with feigned surprise. Because I can. Ignacio is very bad. I laughed. Yeah, sure. What's wrong? Can he no longer live for free? Dad sighed. It's not that. I don't care. Don't call me again asking for favors. I hung up without waiting for a response. That was the first time in my life that I hung up on my father. And it felt good. The following weeks were strangely quiet. No Ignacio, no Claudia, no eternal feeling that someone else was deciding for me. But, as expected, the peace didn't last long. A month later Claudia texted me. Lucia, I know you're angry. But Ignacio has been depressed. He's not the same. Could we talk? I stared at the screen, not knowing whether to laugh or block her directly. Depressed? Right, depressed because his comfortable life at my expense was over. Instead of replying, I did something better. I blocked her number. The truth always wins. The last I heard of Ignacio, a cousin told me at a family meal months later. His plan to find a better place had failed. Without my free apartment, he and Claudia had to rent a small apartment on the outskirts, far from their ideal life in the center of Madrid. And best of all, Claudia left him. She says she got tired of Ignacio not doing anything, my cousin said while stirring her coffee. She left with the child and asked for a divorce. I smiled and took a sip of my wine. Karma. Mom and Dad tried to smooth things over eventually, but it wasn't the same anymore. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I was no longer the docile daughter who said yes to everything, and they didn't know how to handle that. So, over time they stopped insisting. The last time I saw Ignacio was by chance months later. I passed by a coffee shop and there he was, phone in hand, looking lost. He saw me, I saw him. We didn't greet each other. We simply went on with our lives. Because he was no longer a part of mine. The Madrid sun gently hit my window, illuminating every corner of my home. 'Cause yes, now it was just mine. No more toys lying around, no more moved furniture. No more intruders deciding for me. I walked through the living room with my cup of coffee, enjoying the silence. A different silence. Before it felt empty, as if something was missing. Now it was freedom. I sat on the sofa and opened my laptop. I had something in mind. I'd been thinking about it for days. A Reddit post, my story. I had written it last night but didn't dare post it until now. My brother and his wife took my apartment because they needed it more. When I kicked them out, my family treated me like the villain. Now my brother is broke, his wife left him, and my parents are trying to reconnect as if nothing happened. They call me cold, they say family is the most important thing, that I have to be more understanding. But why am I always the one who has to understand? Why never them? Should I forgive them, or cut them off for good? I read the question several times. I really wanted an answer. I stared at the screen thinking. Dad had texted me the other day. Lucia, can we talk? Your mother's worried. Worried about what? Because Ignacio was broke? Because Claudia had left him? Because their son had to live in a modest apartment and not in mine? Not because they had hurt me. Not because they felt guilty. Because for them, I was only useful as long as I could give them something. I took a breath and looked down at the keyboard. My heart was pounding. What I decided now would mark the rest of my life. I could ignore them forever. I could give them another chance. I could take revenge. I bit my lip. The question was still there. The cursor was still blinking. I still didn't know what to do. So I gritted my teeth and hit post. Now all that was left was to wait. I settled on the sofa, took another sip of coffee and opened the comments. What would you do in my place? I woke up to the sound of hundreds of notifications. My Reddit post had exploded in popularity. Thousands of people were commenting, giving their opinions, analyzing my story as if it were a TV series. But what surprised me most were the comments that weren't on my side. I don't know, Lucia. I understand that your brother acted badly, but did he really have to end up on the street with his son? He's family after all. The house belonged to your grandmother, and both were her grandchildren. It doesn't sound very fair that only you get to keep it. Ignacio didn't deserve anything. I'm not saying your brother is a saint, but changing the locks and kicking them out in 48 hours wasn't too much? In the end it backfired because your parents are still on Ignacio's side. It seems like no matter what you did, you were never going to win. That last comment hit me harder than I expected, because it was true. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. My parents had always been on Ignacio's side since we were children. He was the oldest son, the one who made my mother and father smile with pride at family gatherings, the one who received words of encouragement when he failed, the one who never had to prove he deserved love. I, on the other hand, had to earn it. If I got good grades, it was only the minimum expected of me. If I had problems, it was because I was too sensitive. If I needed something, there were always more important things to take care of. And with my paternal grandmother, everything was different. She was the only one who gave me a place, perhaps because she also knew what it was like to be left out. My mother never liked her very much. They never got along. I suppose in her mind, I was the daughter-in-law's granddaughter, not her daughter. So it was Grandma who was with me when my parents weren't, the one who taught me to cook, to care for plants, the one who told me stories of her youth in Seville while we drank hot chocolate in winter. That's why she left me her house. It wasn't a matter of favoritism, it was a matter of love. But as soon as the will was read, my parents made it seem like an injustice. Grandma didn't think about Ignacio's future. You don't need that much space, Lucia. Don't be like that. He's your brother after all. All that came back to my head reading the Reddit comments, and I realized something I had never wanted to admit. Yes, I felt anger at how they treated me. Yes, I was tired of always being the one who had to give in. But above all, yes, I was envious of Ignacio. I saw it in a comment and almost threw my phone on the floor. Lucia, I know your brother treated you badly. But have you ever considered that your anger isn't just about this situation? It seems like you've spent your whole life wanting your parents to see you, to choose you for once. But they never did. Could it be that part of your anger is because of that? Yes, it was because of that. I always hoped that at least once my parents would defend me, that they would say, Lucia is right, this is hers. That they wouldn't automatically side with Ignacio. But they never did. And I had spent years denying how much it hurt me, pretending I didn't care, convincing myself that I didn't need their approval. But if I really didn't care, why did it hurt so much? I rubbed my face with my hands. I had no answers. Should I talk to my parents about this? Would it be worth it? Or better yet, do I really want to continue having a relationship with them? The question lingered in my mind as I looked at the screen.